Welcome to this year's virtual Evening of Roses program. I'm Melinda Hanlon, the chair of the Board of Trustees of the Sister Rose Thering Fund. And on behalf of the board, I'm delighted you can join us here this evening. We're so glad we are able to come together so that we can celebrate our work and express our thanks to you for your support. In fact, the theme of this year's program is gratitude. Even though the last year has been challenging, we do have many things to be grateful for and many blessings in all our lives, including those supporters that we honor here this evening. The Silberman Foundation for their ongoing support of our students with their contributions to scholarships. To Evie Meinhardt, blessed memory, and to her son Edward Meinhardt for their support and advocacy on behalf of the Sister Rose Thering Fund. To Gene Hoffman for his extraordinary contribution in honor of Dr. David Bossman. When we stop and think of all the disruptions this past year to our students and to the educational process, we recognize that more than ever, our work to support teachers here at Seton Hall University is so very important. So I thank you for partnering with us as we change the world one teacher at a time. It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Anthony Shiglitano, the Executive Director of the Sister Rose Thering Fund.
Thank you, Melinda. We also appreciate your superb work as chair of the Sister Rose Thering Board of Trustees. It is my pleasure to open this year's Evening of Roses. During this time each year, we come together with grateful hearts to celebrate all the work that is being done in Sister Rose's name to heal a world wounded by bigotry, intolerance, and racism. Our deepest desire is to become unnecessary. Alas, it is a desire deferred. The Sister Rose Thering Fund seeks to heal with spiritual weapons, the weapons of dialogue, education, and formation, through lending support to teachers who wish to study in the Jewish Christian Studies graduate program at Seton Hall, and bring back what they learned to their classrooms, thus fulfilling the Holocaust mandate of New Jersey. As we say on the board, teach a teacher and educate a generation. We are truly grateful for all those who support this essential mission, many of you in our audience. Indeed, gratitude is the theme of our evening. We find the exhortation to gratitude in the 107th Psalm. Give thanks to Yahweh, for he is good. His love is everlasting. And we know that the word for the Catholic sacrament of communion, Eucharistine, means to give thanks. Gratitude lies at the heart of both Jewish and Catholic traditions. This year, our gratitude will be expressed by the planting of a tree in the newly established Sister Rose Thering Garden of Gratitude in Israel through the Jewish National Fund for every household ticket purchased. I am now very thankful to present Father Colin Kay, Vice President of Mission and Ministry at Seton Hall University, for the invocation for this evening's event.
So much seems so broken these days, doesn't it? Our politics, our economy, our health, even our planet. So many are hurting, and they're not all far away. Many of them are right here beside us. There's much about which we disagree, but perhaps we can agree at least on this much: our need for healing. The path to repairing the world begins with the healing of our hearts, and the healing of our hearts begins with encounter and meeting, with learning and understanding. The very things Sister Rose and this institute and this evening are all about. We're thankful, and that's good, because gratitude is good medicine for a broken world. We turn now to the words of the psalmist, and with the psalmist we call on all the earth to join us in grateful praise. Cry out with joy to the Lord, all the earth. Serve the Lord with gladness. Come before him singing for joy. Know that He, the Lord, is Lord. He made us, we belong to Him. We are His people, the sheep of His flock. Go within His gates giving thanks. Enter His courts with songs of praise. Give Him thanks. Bless His name. Indeed, how good is the Lord. Eternal His merciful love. He is faithful from age to age. Amen. Amen.
It is now my pleasure to introduce Dr. Joseph Nair, current president of Seton Hall University. Dr. Nair is a Navy veteran, received his doctorate from the University of Kansas, and did postdoctoral research at the University of Kansas and Harvard Medical School. President Nair practices as a psychologist in academic, clinical, and private practice settings, while serving at several institutions, including Baylor University, University of Illinois Chicago College of Medicine, and Harvard Medical School. He is the former president of Iona College, where he expressed a profound concern for Jewish-Christian relations. He has continued that concern at Seton Hall with his support for the program in Jewish-Christian Studies and the Sister Rose Thering Fund. We are grateful for his presence with us this evening. I give you President Joseph Nair.
Good evening. I'm pleased to join you in celebrating the life, work, and legacy of Sister Rose Thering. Sister Rose possessed singular qualities that made her a trailblazer. Among them, total confidence in her goals and an infinite determination to achieve them. She simply would not take no for an answer, and anyone who thought they could stop her soon learned otherwise. To be worthy heirs of her legacy, we must be equally determined in opposing religious intolerance and violence, whenever and wherever we find it. I know Sister Rose would be pleased with Pope Francis's efforts to reinforce ties with our Jewish brothers and sisters. The Holy Father has called the relationship between Jews and Catholics since Vatican II a journey of friendship. For that, we have Sister Rose to thank. I'm eager to learn more about Pope Francis from his good friend, Rabbi Abraham Skorka, who will speak to us later in the program. Thank you for supporting the Namesake Fund that has advanced Sister Rose's essential work for 28 years. May this celebration lead us to recommit ourselves to strengthening, as she did so well, the bond between Jews, Christians, and those of other religions. Have a wonderful evening.
It is a special privilege this evening to have Rabbi Abraham Skorka with us as our keynote speaker. No one better represents the spirit of dialogue, hospitality, and education that the Sister Rose Thering Fund seeks to promote. Rabbi Skorka holds advanced degrees in both theology and biophysics. He currently serves as rabbi to Temple B'nai Tikva and is the rector at Seminario Rabbinico Latinoamericano, where he is also professor of biblical and rabbinic literature. He is the recipient of many honorary degrees. Rabbi Skorka has previously served as visiting university professor at the Institute for Jewish-Christian Relations at St. Joseph's University in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. In the introduction to his book of dialogues with Cardinal Bergoglio, now Pope Francis, entitled On Heaven and Earth, he writes beautifully of the significance of dialogue when it arrives at a certain level of intimacy. Quote, "When a dialogue reaches this level of magnitude, one becomes aware of what he or she has in common with the other person. He or she each has the same persistent existential questions, with their various interpretations. Each soul is a reflection of the other. The divine breath which both possess knows to unite the two and then form a link with him that will never weaken. As it is written, a cord of 3 strands is not easily torn apart." We're grateful to have Rabbi Skorka with us this evening.
I would like to express my deepest thanks to Seton Hall University for inviting me to honor the memory of Sister Rose Thering by speaking at this year's Evening of Roses. She had a deep understanding of the importance of accurate and sensitive Christian education about Jews and Judaism, and was deeply affected by the implications of the Shoah for Jews around the world. The Shoah is undoubtedly one of the most horrific atrocities of human against human violence ever recorded. According to Elisabeth Rodinesco in her book Retour sur la question juive, a look back at the Jewish question, it attempts to exterminate the Jewish people not only to erase their presence, but also to remove any trace of their legacy in human history. She explains, and in the Jewish genus, which has become a paradigm of a bad race, was included everything that was not the Aryan genus. The Nazis thus aimed to substitute for the chosen people by fabricating through the Aryan myth a twisted figure of the doctrine of election. Nazism, wrote Pierre Vidal-Naquet in 1987, is a perversa imitatio, a perverse imitation of the image of the Jewish people. It was necessary to break with Abraham and therefore also with Jesus, and to find oneself in a new lineage among the Aryans. End of the quote. In another paragraph, she concludes, this break, which makes Auschwitz a unique event, is due to the fact that the extermination of the Jews served no other purpose than to satisfy a hatred of the Jew so perverse, pathological, and even paranoid as to exclude him from human world. No other reason lay behind this project, not the elimination of an enemy, nor the conquest of territory, nor the enslavement of a people, nor even the desire to satisfy an ancestral call. Probably only Freudian categories allow us to comprehend such a genocidal act in all its collective and individual dimensions. End of the quote. It is interesting to note that Rabbi Abraham Yoshua Heschel, who played an important role in the preparation of Nostra Aetate, had a similar vision about the meaning of the Shoah as early as his famous 1966 essay, No Religion is an Island. He wrote, Nazism in its very roots was a rebellion against the Bible, against the God of Abraham, realizing that it was Christianity that implanted attachment to the God of Abraham and involvement with the Hebrew Bible in the hearts of Western man. Nazism resolved that it must both exterminate the Jews and eliminate Christianity, and bring about instead a revival of Teutonic paganism. End of the quote. In one of the dialogues I had almost 20 years ago with the then Archbishop of Buenos Aires, Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio, and which were later published in our book on Heaven and Earth, he had this to say about the Shoah. The Shoah is genocide, like the others from the 20th century, but it has a distinctive feature. I would not like to say that this is of primary relevance and the others secondary, but there is a distinctive feature. An idolatrous construction against the Jewish people. The pure race, the superior beings, they are idols for the foundation upon which Nazism was built. It is not only a geopolitical problem, there is also a cultural, religious issue. Each Jew that they killed was a slap in the face to the living God in the name of idols. End of the quote. Similarly, Cardinal Walter Casper has clearly explained that the Shoah was based on a primitive racial ideology, but Christian theological anti-Judaism contributed as well, encouraging a widespread antipathy for Jews that was used by Nazism in its policy of hatred and extermination. The Jews, as a deicidal people, guilty of the death of their own brother, Jesus, and their blindness to his divine status as the Son of God, was an image that demonized them for centuries. It could remain dormant for long periods. Only the resurface in times of deep social crisis and provoke bloody persecutions. The massacres perpetrated by the Crusades, the Inquisition, expulsions, pogroms were all eruptions of this latent aggressiveness. It became embedded in European culture and mutated into racist ideologies in the context of secularized modernity, metastasizing horribly during the Shoah. Nostra Aetate, the document produced by the Second Vatican Council, was the Catholic response to the Shoah. We can undoubtedly say after 56 years since its promulgation that Nostra Aetate was a watershed in the history of Jewish-Catholic relations. After a meeting in June 1960 with the French Jewish historian Jules Isaac, Pope John XXIII asked Cardinal Augustin Bea to prepare a document about the Church relation with Jews for the Second Vatican Council that would begin in 1962. Here is where Sister Rose enters the story. Her 1961 dissertation at St. Louis University, Potential in Religious Textbooks for Developing a Realistic Self-Concept, came to the attention of Cardinal Bea when its conclusions about religious textbooks were incorporated into studies presented to him by the American Jewish Committee. Sister Rose's research disclosed widespread negative assertions about Jews in American Catholic textbooks. One textbook, for example, asked, why did the Jews commit the great sin of putting God himself to death? It was because the Lord told them the truth, because he preached a divine doctrine that displeased them, and because he taught them to give up their wicked ways. End of the quote. Her scrutinizing of such statements in Catholic textbooks was not welcomed by many of her fellow Catholics. She was criticized by some bishops for airing the church dirty laundry in public. Nevertheless, her dissertation was influential. Can there be any doubt that Sister Rose's research contributed to the instruction in Nostra Aetate that says all should see to it then that in catechetical work or in the preaching of the Word of God, they do not teach anything that does not conform to the truth of the gospel and the Spirit of Christ. Her work, incidentally, was also a basis for the dissertations of Dr. Eugene Fisher in 1976 and Dr. Philip Cunningham in 1992. Nostra Aetate launched a revolution in Jewish-Catholic relations. It created a possibility of a dialogical relationship such as never existed before in the 2000 years of Christianity. Although there had been many moments in different countries in the past when Jews and Christians lived together in peace as good neighbors, there was conflicted space that separated the two. It was a subject that was not dialogue about only disputed. For 42 years, I served as a rabbi to the B'nai Tikva community in Buenos Aires. It was founded by Rabbi Dr. Fritz Leopold Steinthal, a close friend of Rabbi Leo Beck. On one occasion, the rabbi's son, Enrique Heinz Luis Steinthal, put in my hands about 12 pages that his father had written at a time when he dramatically recalled in his loneliness his hardships during Kristallnacht as a rabbi in Münster, and how the bishop of the city, Clemens August Graf von Galen, had assisted him. Rabbi Steinthal's testimony moved me deeply because at B'nai Tikva I was the continuation of that man's life work. I wanted to know more about the relationship between the rabbi and Bishop von Galen after that tragic night when the Archbishop provided him refuge. As is so often the case with Christian clergy at this time, lights and shadows appear when one looks more closely at their stories. The bishop delivered 3 famous sermons in which he bitterly criticized the Nazi regime and its racist ideology. In them, he mentions Nazi abuses against the institutions of the church, the ignominious euthanasia of citizens who suffered from certain limitations, and their concentration camps. He did not mention Jews as victims of the Nazis at all. Therefore, I understood Bishop von Galen's help to Rabbi Steinthal as humanitarian and circumstantial, but not fraternal. My community of B'nai Tikva in Buenos Aires was founded in 1939 by Jews who had managed to flee from Nazi Germany. He had the opportunity to talk with many of them about their lives under the Nazi regime. One aspect of their experience that has stayed with me is their astonishment when their school classmates with whom they had shared so much from one day to the next stopped talking to them. Neighbors and presumed friends turned into apathetic or hostile strangers overnight. Despite a long history of contempt for Jews and Christian world, the Shoah was not undertaken by Christian church as such. I would like to recall and honor those Christians who opposed the Nazis. Although some harbored a strong aversion to Jews, they nonetheless sought to resist the Nazis. For example, Sofia Kosak-Szuszka worked to rescue Jews from extermination in Poland. On August the 11th, 1942, a few weeks after the start of the Nazis' Operation Reinhardt to eliminate the Jewish population of Poland, she circulated a famous statement, protests, throughout Warsaw. It deserves to be quoted a little bit extensively. The entire world watches these crimes, the wars in history, and remains silent. The slaughter of millions of defenseless people is met with a universal portentous silence. The executioners remain silent, not wishing to boast of their deeds. England and America remain silent. Even influential international jury, which is sensitive to anything detrimental to its members, remains silent. Poles also remain silent. Polish politicians friendly to Jews restrict themselves to diary notes. Poles antagonistic to Jews declare themselves disinterested in a matter which does not concern them. Dying Jews are surrounded by Pilates washing their hands. That silence can no longer be tolerated. It is despicable. Whatever the reason, one cannot remain passive towards crime. Whoever remains silent in the face of murder becomes an accomplice to that murder. Whoever does not condemn consents. Therefore, we Polish Catholics speak out our feeling toward Jews have not changed. We will continue to consider them as political, economic, and idealistic enemies of Poland. Furthermore, we realize that they hate us more than the Germans, that they consider us responsible for their misfortune. Why and what on what basis is a mystery of a Jewish soul. However, it is a confirmed fact. Nonetheless, being aware of these feelings, we are not exempted from an obligation to condemn a crime. We do not wish to be Pilates. We don't have the ability to counteract these German murders actively. We can give no advice. We cannot rescue anyone. However, with our hearts filled with mercy, indignation, and terror, we protest. End of the quote. This document is an excellent example of the ambivalence that characterized many Christians before and during the Shoah. Both sense and senselessness appear when people's consciences are in conflict. Senselessness can sometimes be an inspiration for creativity. It often takes leaps over common sense to discover the many mysteries of nature. It is what helped Einstein to postulate the four-dimensional reality and Cantor to discover the existence of various kinds of infinities. But when it comes to human relationships, a standard of sanity must prevail, which the Torah defines as the path that knows what is right and what is good. The folly of prejudice in human relationship derives away sanity and leads to the most heinous aberrations. Relations between Jews and Christians have been at many times marked by senselessness. The other was seen in caricature rather than as a human being to discover and come to know. Sister Rose shone a bright light into the darkness of this long story and made a substantial contribution to undoing the history of caricaturing each other, a reform that was enshrined in Nostra Aetate. There is a long list of Jews and Catholics and other Christians who acted in the spirit of the document composed by the Second Vatican Council. Thus, Pope John Paul II inspired many bishops and Catholics to pray for God's forgiveness for the sins of the past. That was a major step. It allowed Jews and Catholics to sit together at the table of dialogue, not merely out of courtesy, but with a knowledge that something had changed. The long and lacerating silence of the Catholic Church had ended. I must pause here to observe that the silence during the papacy of Pius XII is a very contentious issue. There are those who condemn him for being publicly silent, while others understand that he saved many lives that way. But after the Shoah, his papacy extended for another 13 years, during which he said nothing about extermination of Jews at the hands of the Nazis and their accomplices. Didn't the subject deserve a deep reflection? Did the Jews cease to be the historical brothers of the Christians? Why so much indifference? But following in the footsteps of John the 23rd, John Paul II put an end to such heartbreaking silence. He called the Jews elder brothers in the faith. He visited the great synagogue in Rome, so near geographically to the Vatican and yet so distant spiritually until that moment. He established full diplomatic relations with the State of Israel, visited it, and placed an incredible significant prayer into the Western Wall. Even so, it takes time and a steady commitment to build trust. It takes time for people to come to feel that they can be fully confident in one another. This was my experience as I came to know the virtues of the man who would become Pope Francis, Jorge Bergoglio. I can tell you about the many events in which he participated with me and other members of the Jewish community in Buenos Aires. Events which led to a relationship of trust such as had never before existed between Jews and Catholics. His constant vigilance against any displays of anti-Semitism were impressive and gratifying. On two occasions, he preached movingly to my congregation at the Selichot religious service, the preparatory prayers for the reception of the Jewish New Year and the Day of Atonement that follows. He invited me to give a lesson to the seminarians of the Seminario Metropolitano de Buenos Aires. He chose me to write the preface to his authorized biography. Together, we wrote a book of our dialogues, appeared in 31 television programs, and much more. But the most important thing was the relationship of full and deep trust that grew between us, not merely representing the peaceful coexistence between Jews and Catholics. We enjoyed a relationship of affection dedicated to the sincere and mutual search for knowledge and understanding. There was no topic that we did not discuss, and so we created a reality beyond and our differences. The most recent encyclical of Pope Francis, Fratelli Tutti, expresses his profound vision and sentiments about universal brotherhood. It is a call to recognize other people's humanity, thereby overcoming all prejudices that prevent a total and sincere relationship. Sister Rose's work in promoting accurate education and knowledge of the other remains a model for achieving what Francis proclaims in his encyclical. I would number her among those individuals whose work has made a great difference in coming to know of her dedication and labors. I am reminded a poem written by Hannah Senesh, a young Jewish woman who was executed in 1944 by Hungarian fascists for her efforts to rescue Jews. She wrote, "Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame. Blessed is the flame that burns in the secret fastness of the heart. Blessed is the heart with strength to stop its beating for honor's sake. Blessed is the match consumed in kindling flame." Sister Rose Thering, like Hannah, lit flames of nobility in the hearts of many. She is remembered by all those who believe that it is possible to build a world of dignity despite the endless failures of the past. Like the great women of the past, she was left to all of us an example of the courage and greatness that contributed to making a turning point in history. The theme of this evening of roses is gratitude. To thank and to acknowledge have the same verb in Hebrew, lehodot. Through these reflections, I wish to express my appreciation and gratitude to Sister Rose Thering for her contribution to the building of a path that leads to the reality dreamed by prophets and expected by God. Thank you so much.
We now have for you a musical performance led by Seton Hall Director of Choral Activities, Dr. Jason Tram. Monsignor Robert Sheeran will receive this evening the honorary designation of Trustee Laureate to the Sister Rose Thering Fund. Monsignor Sheeran studied classical languages and holds a doctorate in sacred theology, and was president of Seton Hall University from 1995 to 2009, during which time he helped elevate the intellectual and academic level of Seton Hall University. He has been a tremendous supporter of the Sister Rose Thering Fund and remains so to this day. I am very honored to give you Monsignor Robert Sheeran.
Good evening. I am delighted to be with you all for this annual Evening of Roses. I think of many things when I recall Sister Rose. I can remember our very first meeting. It was shortly after I came to Seton Hall in 1980, and Sister introduced herself to me, and I said, "Oh, you're a professor in the College of Education." And she said, "Oh, yes, but my passion is for Jewish-Christian relations and for Israel." And she ended by saying, "And Father, you must come with me to Israel on one of my trips," one of her dozens of trips. I never got to Jerusalem with Sister Rose, although a couple of years after her death in 2008, a small Seton Hall group, accompanied by our dear friend Luna Kaufman, went to Jerusalem for the 60th anniversary of the creation of the State of Israel. And while we were there was a very nice recognition at Yad Vashem, the great Holocaust museum, a beautiful recognition of the work that Sister Rose had accomplished in bringing Jews and Christians together. Sister Rose was very aware of that old saying that the world that we are creating today will be to no small extent dependent on how and what we teach our children. And that is one of the reasons why Sister Rose was so firmly committed to Holocaust education everywhere. Sister Rose once said, and I think it was at an Evening of Roses, "I have a mission." Afterwards, at the reception, I said, "Sister Rose, you don't have a mission. You are a mission." And she was indeed. And Sister Rose's mission is our mission as well. We are very grateful and we have much gratitude for what has been accomplished. We want to move that mission ever forward with confidence and trust. Good evening.
We will now hear from one of our esteemed graduates of the graduate program in Jewish Christian Studies, Kibwe Miller. Mr. Miller received his degree in 2018. When Deborah Lerner asked Kibwe several questions about his experience in the graduate program of Jewish Christian Studies, he wrote, quote, "Since I always had a keen interest in religion, spiritual matters, and social justice, Jewish Christian Studies seemed like a perfect fit. If I had to choose what I liked best, it was an overall feeling of sincerity and inclusion amongst everyone involved. Everyone was extremely knowledgeable, humble, and friendly. I would be hard-pressed to choose a favorite because I enjoyed it all so much. The professors and subject were phenomenal. Thank you, Kibwe, and thank you for all your work educating young people has accomplished."
Good afternoon. Every year we gather in commemoration of the legacy of Sister Rose. We celebrate her courage, her life in opposing prejudice, bigotry, and hatred. We are reminded of our duty to follow her example and create a better world. As a graduate of the Institute of Judeo-Christian Studies, I am eternally grateful and humble for those who sacrifice their resources, their time, and their knowledge to educate future teachers, leaders, to teach and learn and continue the legacy of Sister Rose. I thank you so much. The spirit is very much alive, although we are not together in person. We celebrate virtually. We thank Almighty God for those trailblazers like our dear Sister Rose. And we thank those who are following in her footsteps. And we ask God to guide them and bless them to be strong, to be courageous, and to be loving, and to stand up for truth and justice, like Sister Rose did. So once again, I thank you. I thank you. I thank you so much for everything you have done for me and creating a better world where those of all faiths and walks of life can learn and work together to create a better world for all of us. Thank you and peace.
We are glad this evening to be able to honor and thank Mr. Gene Hoffman, or perhaps more accurately, Dr. Gene Hoffman, as he will soon be awarded an honorary doctorate from the Spertus Institute in Hebrew Letters. Mr. Hoffman certainly exemplifies lifelong learning. Mr. Hoffman is also a remarkably generous supporter of the Sister Rose Thering Fund, and because of his generosity, not only will we have scholarships to offer future teacher scholars for many years to come, but also competitive grants for teacher scholars who wish to develop materials that can be used in classrooms across the United States. Mr. Hoffman has kindly agreed to say a few words to us tonight.
So we have Gene Hoffman being honored tonight. How did you get started in religion?
Well, I was training for the New York Marathon, and on my long distance training runs, I started to think about religion, and if religion is so good, how come we have so many problems in the world? And as time went on, I decided to take courses part-time at Drew University. They were graduate courses, and I fortunately got into them. I don't know how that worked out. And at Princeton, where I studied with Martha Himmelfarb and Mark Gross, who are well-known authors, and I liked it so much. And then I joined Seton Hall's Jewish Christian Studies program at night with Father Bossman and Father Frizzell and Rabbi Finkel. And I also met Sister Rose there. And I really enjoyed those courses. They were very stimulating and gave me a lot of food for thought. So much so, my conversations with Sister Rose, she came to my Chevrolet agency and bought a car. And she noticed while I was talking to her that I was staring down at her necklace, which was a cross and a Star of David. And I said to her, you know, I don't understand. She says, well, between the orange car that I want and the necklace, nothing can hurt me. I'll be protected all the way around. Well, then I decided to go to Seton Hall Religious Studies program, where David was my first teacher. We became very friendly, and I used to take him on my sailboat. We discussed religion and life in general, and he was very influential on my life, and I kept studying and taking courses, and I finally graduated in 1997 from Seton Hall. And I really enjoyed studying about religion and my religion and everybody else's religion. I then took a course in Islam at Drew University, and my interest kept peaking and peaking, and I kept going and wanted more. But by 2010, I found out about Gratz College outside of Philadelphia had an online program. I had already tried Yale's online program, but that didn't work out too well. And I signed up at Gratz, took courses for a couple of years, and really, really enjoyed it. They were very stimulating and thought-provoking. And by 2013, I got a master's degree. My interest didn't go away. I still kept going. and I read about Spertus Institute for Jewish Studies in Chicago and found out that it was an accredited college, and I decided to go for a doctorate in Jewish Studies, which I did, and which I obtained. It took me from 2015 till now to get my doctorate, and I'm still taking courses even though I have the degree, which I will probably could do as long as I can. And I can't thank David enough for his influence on my life in religion, and we were friendly. We discussed sailing on the religion on my boat, and we had lunch, and we spent a lot of time together. And I really feel he was an important factor to where I am today. Thank you very much for this honor.
We are now happy to have a few words from another former teacher scholar in the graduate program in Jewish Christian Studies, Mr. Franklin Stebbins. Mr. Stebbins was a gifted high school teacher in Clark, New Jersey, and has won a number of awards for his many works with students. We are thrilled that he joined the Sister Rose Thering board in 2019. Today he works for the organization Facing History and Ourselves, an organization dedicated to the study of history in view of uncovering the roots of contemporary bigotry and hate and challenging students to stand up against both. I give you Mr. Franklin Stebbins.
Hello, and thank you for joining us for today's Evening of Roses virtual gala. While the Evening of Roses has been a long-standing event to gather in community, celebrate the life of Sister Rose Thering, and recognize the amazing contributions of so many, I am thrilled to be joining you today to briefly discuss the impact the Sister Rose Fund had on me. Even though I completed my undergraduate degree at Seton Hall University, I did not learn about Sister Rose Thering until well into my teaching career. I received an email about a student essay contest based on the documentary Sister Rose's Passion. After watching the film, I was struck by the story of this amazing woman. Her desire to make change, challenge the status quo, and be an upstander were all inspirational. Her passion and her legacy were clear to my students as well as myself. Through generous donations, I, like so many other educators, was able to complete courses in the Jewish Christian Studies program. The Kurt C. and L. Silberman Scholarship, as well as the Deborah Lerner Duane and Daniel J. Duane Scholarship, provided me the opportunity to study with amazing professors. It was an honor to learn from Father Frizzell and Dr. David Bossman. Their passion to educate was only matched by my classmates' desire to learn. Being able to engage in dialogue with not only such knowledgeable professors, but with a diverse group of teachers surely improved my professional skills as well as my reflections as an individual and as a parent. The courses encouraged me to constantly reflect on my teaching practices, to challenge myself and my students to recognize injustice in our local and global communities, and to be active participants in trying to change those injustices. I had the privilege to be a New Jersey public school teacher for 17 years, spending 4 of those years teaching a full-year Holocaust and Genocide Studies course to high school juniors and seniors. Since leaving the classroom, I have also taught a graduate course to educators on teaching the Holocaust, as well as teaching prejudice reduction. Currently, I'm a senior program associate for New Jersey Growth and Strategy for Facing History and Ourselves, an organization that uses the lessons of history to challenge teachers and their students to stand up to bigotry and hate. Through all my work, Sister Rhodes' words still apply. Through understanding and appreciation of others, I hope I can become a better person. Once again, thank you to the generous donors who were able to provide scholarship opportunities, and to all of you for joining us today.
At this year's Evening of Roses, we wish to especially thank and honor Mr. Edward Meinhardt, Evie Meinhardt of blessed memory, and Mr. Peter Friedman. Over the last several years, dozens of Sister Rose Thering Fund teacher scholars have completed Holocaust-focused courses at Seton Hall's Jewish Christian Studies graduate program, each the beneficiary of the inspiring philanthropy of the Kurt C. and L. Silberman Foundation. We are extremely grateful to Silberman Foundation trustees Evie Meinhardt and Edward Meinhardt, along with that of Foundation President Peter Friedman, for their belief in our mission and their confidence in our teacher scholars' ability to bring their Jewish Christian studies education to the children in their classrooms. I give you now Mr. Edward Meinhardt and Mr. Peter Friedman.
On behalf of my mom of blessed memory, I'd like to thank the Sister Rose Thiering Foundation Board of Trustees for honoring both of us and the Kurt C. and Elsa Silverman Foundation this evening. The foundation celebrates the Evening of Roses and honors and in memoriam our beloved trustee, my mom, who was instrumental in the support of the Sister Rose Thiering Foundation's mission to educate and train Holocaust teachers. Kurt Silverman devoted his life to fighting for the rights and serving the interests of the Jews and Jewish victims of Nazi persecution, and to assuring the roots of prejudice and the Holocaust and the lessons of are understood to serve the betterment of society. The Silverman Foundation has found much synergy with the principles of the Sister Rose Thiering Foundation. Your dedication to fostering, understanding, and cooperation among Jews and Christians and peoples of other religions and traditions through advocacy and education is admirable. Our foundation's very first gift, multi-million-dollar gift to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. This gift has continued to endow the Silverman Summer Seminar. This annual seminar invites and pays all the expenses for 20 college professors from all over the world to come to D.C. and to be part of a 2-week seminar on different aspects of the Holocaust. Every year, the application pool is far greater than the 20 spaces the seminar is limited to. The committee works hard to select a group from all over the world. The commonality of this group is a lack of accessibility to tools and knowledge to teach the Holocaust to their students. This seminar has many similarities to the scholarships that we endow at the Sister Rose Foundation here at Seton Hall University. I know how much my mom loved learning about all the scholarships recipients and their backgrounds. She would always show me and was very impressed with the thank yous that she received. My mom was truly an incredible woman who taught and guided me so much. Who I am today comes from the basic principles and cores and values that she instilled in me, which brings us here to this evening, giving back and being involved. She had a burning desire to live, love, and learn. She was so involved with many local and international organizations. She loved learning about the group and their needs. My mom was tough, demanding, always told you how she was feeling, but she was kind, generous, and devoted to her family, dedicated, and a true lady. People were drawn to her personality, her charm, her style, and her smile. On behalf of my mom and myself, thank you again for this wonderful and meaningful honor.
Good evening. I'm pleased to join you virtually on behalf of the Kurt and Elsa Silverman Foundation. We are very pleased that you are honoring one of our trustees, the late Evie Meinhardt, who brought our foundation and the Sister Rose program together. Evie Meinhardt's life was forever changed by the Holocaust, by the inability of peoples to understand each other. And we hope that this program continues to bring peoples together, Christians and Jews. Thank you very much for honoring Evie tonight.
Almighty God, who has breathed the spirit of life into human beings, we pray to you now as we remember the life of Sister Rose Thiering. Bless her tireless efforts to promote understanding and friendship between Jews and Christians by making them a source of inspiration for all of us. May the radiance of her zeal illuminate our lives. As the text of Proverbs teaches us, May the memory of the righteous be forever a source of blessing. And in the words of the psalmist, may her righteousness endure forever by remaining vibrant in our hearts and minds. O Lord of all creation, grant to us the understanding that life is an opportunity that you have given to us as a gift, so that we may dialogue with one another and so draw closer to you. May the lessons taught to us by the righteous, such as Sister Rose, guide us and the generations that will follow us. May their examples be incorporated into our beings, and may we be faithful to them in each and every one of our actions. May the favor of the Lord our God rest on us and establish the work of our hands for us. Yes, establish the work of our hands. Amen.
Thank you all for being here with us for this year's Evening of Roses program. Thank you to all our participants, to our honorees, and to all our supporters. Stay safe and be well. Good night.